The decisions are going to support the long-term financial stability. So something I've said a number of times is we've identified reductions that we're identifying reductions that are going to be duplicated over year. So, for example, if we reduce printing cost in year one, which would be the next school year, not only would it impact next year, but it would impact the year after and the year after and the year after. So that decision to reduce, it's important that it's year over year. It's not just 1 year, because our budget compounds upon each other from year to year. We're committed to making sure that we preserve the high quality learning that we have throughout the district. One of the things I've continually said, the strength of Madison is the people. The strength within our district is our staff. That is something that we're very attentive to. And while we know that there will have to be reductions with staff, we're trying to limit that because we know that's what makes us really strong. Our desire is to be transparent and collaborative through the process, which is much like having these presentations. I would also encourage you to look at the website. We have a page that is the budget reduction process, and we're putting these videos on that. We're trying to share it in many different ways. There's a lot of documents that we've placed on there as well, so I would encourage you to look at the website under that page as well. We need to identify $3 million from our $30 million budget, so that's 10%. It's a large amount of money that we have to reduce within 1 year, and that reduction has to occur for the next school year. So we have to make those decisions rather quickly. I'll kind of talk about the timeline as we go, but we have to reduce $3 million from our $30 million budget prior to the next school year. So the reductions will occur as we start that next school year. The timeline a little bit, so the reductions, I'll present them to the board during the February board meeting for the board to make a decision on those reductions, and then those will go into effect prior to the 26-27 school year. So as this school year concludes, but prior to the next school year, those will go into effect. And then, as I was saying before, they will impact next year's budget, but the year after budget and the year after. We're trying to identify things that are compounding year over year. Why do we have the deficit? So one, the state funding formula changed. The state determines the funding for districts during the biennium budget process, and the changes that they make impact school districts. Part of that is tied to our enrollment, and that's a huge factor. The number of kids we have determines the amount of money that we're going to get from the state. Currently, and I've added a few of these details, currently our kindergarten through third grade, we average 161 students per grade level. Fourth through 12th grade, we average 189 students per grade level. Just if you compare those two blocks of students, you can see that our older grade levels, we have higher numbers, but our lower grade levels, we have lower numbers. That shows the decline of enrollment. What you can project then within any school district is if you look at your kindergarten to third grade numbers, that average enrollment will become the 4th to 12th grade, because every year kids move up a grade level. It also can tell you what to project for your next kindergarten grade level, and the year after that, and the year after that. And I would recommend to people that 161 number is going to become our normal class level for students within a grade level, and it may be a little bit less, but that number is a good number to use as a ballpark of what our average grade level number is going to become. Currently, we have 2,490 kids in grades pre-K through 12th grade. So through all grade levels in our district, that's how many students that we have. Additionally, the county property tax give back that was recently decided by the county commissioners that impacted us roughly $400,000, which we actually had to reduce immediately because that impacts us very quickly. That was another factor. And then, of course, the rising operational costs, which I know that every homeowner feels that same impact. Your insurance is going up, your utilities, your day-to-day operations, groceries. I went and had lunch at Arby's today, and it blew me away. For two people, it was over $20. Like that, I remember going, I feel so old now. I remember going to Taco Bell, and it was 49 cents for a taco. You know, Taco Bell, there's nothing for 49 cents anymore. Maybe extra hot sauce or something. But so it's just like that compounding increase in expenses for everybody. And I'm not just saying that as a school district, for everybody is really difficult. How are schools funded? So I wanted to talk a little bit about this because I think this is a really important area for people to know about how schools get funding. We first get funding from the state, and that's a huge portion of our funding is from the state. It's based on a formula which is based on enrollment of students, so that 2,490 kids. If we have less kids, we get less funding. If you have more kids, you get more. They also look at student needs, so we get a little bit of an increase based on the needs of students, and that could be both poverty, it could be students that don't speak English, it could be students with disabilities. They don't fully fund any of those areas, but they do give you an increase in funding. They don't fully fund them in the idea that some of those different areas, there's a substantial increase in cost, but you're not fully reimbursed or fully funded at the state level or the federal level for that. We also get local funding, which I think people know is voted on by the property taxes that are through the district. And then federal funding, we get grants is what they call them, is federal grants, but you don't really apply for them. It's based on the students that you have, and they give you money for that as well. And that's a very small portion for the district. That's roughly 5%. It's a very small amount that we get from federal funds. Some important elements about the current model of funding. The state again sets the base cost of how much does it cost to educate a student. They created a few years ago the Fair School Funding Plan, and that creates that base cost. What I would tell you is they are not fully funding that. They're not fully committing to what they said they're going to do. I am complaining about it. I guess I was going to say I'm not complaining about it, but the state has made some changes. They've made decisions. They're overly funding charter schools, private schools. They're not funding public schools at the same rate. And it's not just opinion, that's very factual. You can see that very clearly, and I'd be happy to share that, but that's a challenge that we have. And then there's categorical funding, which goes back to what I was talking about for special education, English learners, and also transportation. We do get a reimbursement for transportation. Again, it's not the full cost of transportation, but it's a portion of. And then the state local share is determined by the property taxes that are raised by voting levies. So you can look district by district, and every district is different based on the property taxes that are raised. The state looks at how much money is raised by property taxes. They look at their fair school funding model, which they don't fully fund that, but they look at that. They look at your property taxes. They say this is the missing amount between those two figures, and then they fill the gap. So, for example, districts that have really high property taxes, they don't get as much of a state share of money. We get a large state share of money. Within the county, only Perry has a lower amount they get from the state, which is tied to they have a unique revenue source with the power plant. So They don't have as many property taxes, nor do they get as much state share. We're the second lowest district of property taxes, so we get a larger state share in there. Does that make sense? Okay. And then levies are voted on when they're approved, and then that sets the millage rate and the amount of money that's going to be raised. It does not increase year over year, and that's one of those uniquenesses. We don't see, as inflation rises, we don't see more money from levies. They're capped at a number. There's a thing called inside. This is really, and if I'm losing you, just tell me and I'll move on. But I think school funding is very fascinating. I think that, we don't understand it real well, and I haven't for a long time. There's two kinds of levies. There's an inside millage, which school districts can determine that millage, and that is a really small portion of our budget. All the other millage is based on levies that community members vote on. When your property goes up in value, we don't see an increase on the levies you vote on. We do not see an increase there. We see it on the inside millage, but not the voted millage. And that is a rather confusing idea. But the inside millage, we do see, but again, that is a really small portion of our budget. So the other day, somebody had asked, when our property taxes go up, does the district see more money? And I initially said no, but then I revised it and said we do, but it's really small because we see it on the inside millage, which is a significantly small amount of money. The voted millage, the voted levies that you do, we do not see that increase. So I think that's an important part. So the answer to that question is yes, we see an increase, but it's very small. It's not directly aligned to what your property tax value increases. Any questions on that? Because that was a lot, and that could be confusing. Okay, yes?
Where does that money end up going?
Okay, and that is like the $1 million question. Where does the money go from? I'm sorry, the question, I'm really bad at that. I did it the last time too. The question was, where does the property tax increase go when your property's values are raised? So it actually goes to the state, and then they redistribute it. So that does not get seen directly within the community. They will take that and then they'll determine again how much money are they going to, as a state, contribute to the school district, which could get adjusted based on that increase. But we do not directly see that money. That's a very complicated idea, and I know that is a little complicated. How do school budgets work? So that's an important part too, I think, is that every year we set our budget prior to the school year starting. We know how much money we're going to have. We know what our revenue is based on, again, the state, local, and federal revenues that come in. We know how much money there is. We know how many kids we're anticipating, and then we plan our budget. Over 80% of our budget is in staffing, so that's a huge part of our budget. And then, of course, transportation operations, and then the various programs, curriculum that we need, anticipation of facility upgrades or improvements that we need to make. All those things are budgeted, and we plan them out in advance. That's why when there's a change in how much revenue we're going to have, it impacts us if we have to make a decision really quickly to adjust for that. That's why the reduction that the county commission did was really challenging, because we had to make in the moment live decisions around how are we going to reduce the budget by roughly $400,000. That's a really complicated process for a school district. And then we need to look at how are we going to make those changes year over year, which is why reducing by 10% for the next school year is challenging, but at least we have time to plan that. That would be the positive to this, is that we have time to look at what can we do to plan for that. Unexpected expenses, of course, occur. Any of you familiar with North, you know that there are different building challenges over there, and those expenses come up. You know, we've had multiple roof challenges that we've had to impact throughout the year, and those expenses are additional financial pressures that we have to anticipate, but then also respond to as they come up. And then educating students, it's not stagnant, and that's a factor as well. Our enrollment changes daily. We'll have kids that come into the district, we'll have kids that leave the district, and that's a daily thing, and we have to continually adjust for that as well. Or if there are students that come into the district that are more costly to educate, that's a factor that we have to be aware of as well. So it's really planning really well in advance of how you're going to use revenue, setting that up, planning for unintended expenses, and then in the moment, reviewing your finances constantly. It's one of the things that I think has been really positive is we have a weekly finance meeting now that myself, the treasurer, and 3 others sit in on. So we're looking at our finances constantly. We're examining, are there changes we can make? And that's a really good function for a school district, to continually look at your finances so that way you can fully inform the school board and make really strong decisions. Through the process, our goals, which I've kind of mentioned a little bit, it's making sure we reduce the spending that we need to, the $3 million, which is 10%, but also protecting learning, safety, and the opportunities we provide for kids, limiting the reduction of staff where possible. Our 5 commitments are just those: protect learning and safety, communicate openly, engage with all of you, maintain our academic strength, and see if we have areas we can improve academically, and then make sure that we're using our tax dollars, from our taxpayers' dollars, responsibly and wisely. Overview a little bit. So the 6 phases that we've created, which started in November and it will run through June, and these adjust over the time as well, but to ensure that we're being very transparent and carefully examining everything. Phase 1, November to December, is to share the full financial picture. I believe we have tried to take a good amount of time, a good amount of different ways to do that, both in meetings and electronically and on Facebook and on the website, to share that information, to collect ideas, which I'll share this later, but to share it now as well. We have a document that you can access and you can share ideas. I know I counted the other day, and I think it's close to 120 ideas that we've gotten now. And we look at every one of those and we examine them. And I know that the staff in our district could tell you, we'll examine every single one. Some of them, I don't know that they're the ideas that are best to impact the way that we desire to, but I'll explore any option to see is there a solution there. And we're going to have that form open and through December 31st. So as of January 1st, that'll close, but that's also accessible through our website that you can share ideas for us to examine. Phase 3 and 4. Phase 3 is December to February. The new board, as they come on in January, they're going to review the data and the reductions, and ultimately those reductions that I recommend. At the February board meeting, the board will have to take action on that. I'm very appreciative of our current board and of the future board. They've done work together so that they're very informed, worked on the transition, which I think is a wonderful testament to all of those individuals involved, and really shows the commitment to the work of the district, but also to the community and our students individually. Phase 4, which is January to February, is to share the recommendations publicly and gather feedback. So I was talking about a timeline earlier. So to talk through this a little bit, we're going to have our thoughts of where our recommendations are going to go. In January, I will meet with staff members that are impacted by reductions. Following that, I'll meet with staff members collectively to share what are the recommendations we're exploring that I'll present to the board. And then I'll share that with the community, and then in February, the board will be given the recommendations, which clearly throughout that timeline, the board's going to be very aware of the information. I'm not surprising the board in any way, but I believe it is important for me to share what my recommendations are going to be after staff have been properly informed. I believe it's important for the community to hear what those recommendations are and to be able to provide feedback. I know I've said this many times and I'll continue to say it. Cutting 10% of the budget, $3 million, there's nothing I'm going to recommend that is good. It's all bad. It's all going to be challenging. It's going to be challenging to staff. It's going to be challenging to families. It's going to be challenging the students. It's going to be challenging the kids. But I believe significantly in being transparent and being honest with people and being open with people at the right time to make sure that people are aware and can provide feedback. I fully appreciate when I share with all those groups, there's going to be frustration. You know, as I continually say, and I said again tonight, all the recommendations are going to be bad. To cut $3 million from a budget, there's not a good answer in there. Phase 5 and 6, Phase 5, which is February to June, is really then implementing the approved reductions and with clear communication. And then Phase 6 is monitoring the savings that we have anticipated with the reductions, track the impact, and report progress. So you're going to, once the board has made the decisions on my recommendations in February, you're going to keep getting updates as we go through, because I believe, again, it's important that you are able to see what those savings are and that we're able to collectively track the impact and then report the progress that we make. I know a question that's come up is, well, we need to do this year, like the next year and the next year. If we identify and reduce the 3 million, which is 10%, before the next school year, that 3 million the next year becomes 6 million. The year after it becomes 9 million. It keeps accumulating year upon year. When you look at our budget right now over a 4-year period, it will balance our budget every single year with these reductions we're making, we're going to propose prior to next school year, as long as those reductions are able to be duplicated year over year. And those are going to be. That's a necessity of this. We'll need to be very attentive to our enrollment every single year moving forward, because as I showed you with our enrollment, that 161 number I believe that I showed you is what I would project as our new enrollment every year moving forward in kindergarten, and then kindergarten becomes first grade and onward. But we're going to have to be very attentive, because if our numbers continue to slip downward, that again impacts our funding, primarily from the state is where that gets impacted, and we're going to have to make intelligent, wise financial decisions year after year after year. But we're not going to have to do this kind of reduction. And that, I would again say, I pause to say anything's a positive, but that is a not awful thing. We can, you can look at your budget year over year, and if you're really attentive to it, you can make small reductions. It's this larger reduction that is really hard. But making this large reduction, which is duplicated year over year within our budget, will put us on a really good path moving forward and stabilize our budget. Then we can be very attentive, continue those weekly finance meetings, and really look year over year, are there small reductions we can make to make sure we maintain a balance and a positive light. Yeah.
I know everything's up in the air, but we talk about making implementations. Will we be cutting staff positions then next semester, or would that wait till next year?
The question was, thank you. Will the staff reductions occur during this next semester this year? No. None of the reductions that I'm going to propose to the board will be immediate. They will all be following the end of this school year, but prior to the beginning of next school year, which time-wise you can look at that as it's going to occur at when will they functionally occur? The board will vote in February. They will functionally occur in June and July prior to August, which is when the next school year starts. Does that make sense? Okay. Those reductions that we had to make immediately because of the changes by the county commissioners, those were changes we were able to make by not involving staff members in any way. We were able to make a lot of small reductions with costs. We looked at our workman's comp rate, essentially. We examined that, and we were able to reduce the amount we pay for workman's comp. It was a small amount, but small amounts add up. We identified printing costs that we could reduce. There were a lot of small things we looked at to reach roughly $400,000, nothing involving staff. But this next part, this 10%, which will occur again between June and August, essentially, that will involve staff through that process. Collaboration, so we met with staff members. We're setting up a time to have another meeting with staff members as we kind of work through this process a little bit more. We also have a joint reduction team that meets. We just met this morning. That involves administrators as well as union members of our teachers association and our classified staff, which is like custodians, secretaries, food service individuals. We come together, talk about the reductions, look for ideas, but also share what the process is and kind of the buckets of options that we're looking at, which I'll talk a little bit more about as well. And then continually engaging with people, with our employees. I mentioned having that budget reduction team, which I think has been very valuable. And then looking department by department. We've really, with our finance team, we've met with transportation, we've met with our food service program, we've met with all those different departments of looking at, are there other funding things that we can do? Are there other funding reductions we can do? And then engaging with families and community members. 115 was the recommendations. I think I said 120 earlier, so it was 115 that we've gotten through that electronic process. The idea submission form, which I talked a little bit about already, it's going to be through December 31st. I would encourage anyone to go on. I know that Andrea will share it again on Facebook. It's on our website as well. You can submit ideas. The only thing I ask is to try to submit, there's kind of questions to help you with, but if you would try to address those within your submission, it would help us to be able to then vet those opportunities to see, are they practical and do they meet the goals that we have. And that's what the submission form looks like. I blocked the link out, but I'll have Andrea share that again. Opportunities to engage. We've tried to have multiple meetings. I know we have some more meetings coming up. Each time I'll try to share more information as more information is available, but some of it will be historical information, because I know we have a during the day event coming up pretty soon, and part of that goal, we're trying to be in different locations, also trying to be in different times to try to hit opportunities for different individuals to come out to, but also those that are regularly coming out, trying to provide information that is new for them as well. And then share those. We're not live streaming anything, but we are sharing videos, so that way if people are not able to take part in the meeting, they can still watch it as well. And then that's our district website page that you can go to, and I believe there's like 7 different categories we have on that now, which again, it does include our videos of the different presentations. I mentioned this a little bit. We actually reduced over $400,000 when we had that initial deficit issue, which I've kind of talked about. We're meeting weekly to make sure we review those budgetary options that we have. And then again, trying to minimize the impact on classrooms wherever possible. Some options. So this is a new area. These are kind of buckets that I look at, reduction opportunities. So operational and efficiency adjustments, and kind of the goal and principle around that. And then what are some of those areas? Facilities, utilities. We've improved some of the utility efficiencies already. Contracted services, we have a number of contracts through the ESC, Educational Service Center, and others. We've reduced subscriptions that we have. We're looking at, kids have we have a lot of apps that we use for educational purposes, or software that we use, and really looking at all of that. Everything that we use, is there a way that we can reduce and make sure we're still providing the same services, but is there a way to be more efficient with that? This area would also involve transportation adjustments, utilizing grants to make sure that we're offsetting eligible costs. The grants would be primarily federal grants, but also grants that we can apply for. We've applied for, I believe, 5 different safety grants this year already, to look at things that we want to do for the district safety-wise, but to be able to get funds to do it and not just rely on our general budget that we have. And then looking at overtime, supplies, and purchasing controls as well. So that's one bucket of things that could be in the reductions. Okay, so I'm trying to give you buckets of areas. Number 2 would be programmatic and staffing. Again, making sure the goal here is aligning staffing to enrollment and needs. And I know you guys have heard me talk about that a little bit. We have to be really attentive to what our enrollment is, making sure that we have the right amount of staff. I can tell you within this district that we don't have an overabundance of staff at all. We have a well-aligned amount of staff members in the district. Class sizes are on the larger side. We use a lot of individuals to do a lot of work. We don't have a large administrative team. We don't have a large district administrative team. It's pretty well aligned. But looking at staffing is one of those areas. Looking at our secondary schedule and the course loads that we have. Class sizes I've talked about, supplemental contracts, stipends, extended time contracts, and then athletic and extracurricular alignment as well. So that is another bucket of area that you could look at for reductions. Number 3 then is structural, which is really long-term, and revenue options. So within this area, it's our building usage, our grade configuration, our fee structure, which could be for activities or athletics, technology, facilities, all of that. our property use. Are there opportunities to sell property or explore partnerships? I would say under the sell property point that selling property is a one-time issue. That is not a year over year. So that would be good for the immediate, but it's only going to impact us for 1 year of the budget. I know this question, I've actually had this a number of times. What if somebody gave us $3 million? I know the last time I said, it'd be great, I'd absolutely take it. I would name whatever they want to be named for it. But I need 10 people to give us $3 million for each of the next 10 years. And I would still tell you we have to make reductions, because that gift, that type of gift, is not going to fix the underlying issue. The underlying issue really is we have a decreased enrollment. That is the underlying issue. We get funded based on enrollment. The answer, the solution to that would be get all the enrollment back. Lake County has had a dramatic decrease in enrollment, has had a dramatic decrease in childbirths. That's not going to change. It's just the fact of what it is. Ohio has a reduced enrollment and a reduced childbirth. There are other states that have a dramatic increase, but we're not that. So it's just the reality of Lake County. So we have to be realistic upon that and appreciate that that is the underlying factor of the finances, is because schools are financed in a significant way based on enrollment. When you have a decrease in enrollment over 20 years, it impacts then your finances, and you have to adjust for that. Calendar or operational model redesign, that could be an option. Our use of our facilities during the weekend, making sure that we're properly charging for those expenses that occur for use of our buildings. And then in closing, I really appreciate people coming out. I really appreciate the involvement. I really value those that have submitted ideas. I think that that type of conversation, collaboration is incredibly important. You know, I am very reflective on the point that this is a good community. I've said this so many times that everyone here should be very proud of the community, should be very proud of the schools. You know, when you walk into our schools, you feel the type of culture that has been created over many, many years, which is reflective of our kids, our parents, our staff. It's a very caring place. It's a place where people work together to figure out solutions and do everything they can to help and make sure kids are well prepared for. It's not everywhere. That's not normal everywhere. And I appreciate coming into the community. It's very, very clear for me to see that. And I think all of you should be very proud of that. I think you should be proud that at our last event, I think we had 90-some people. Tonight we have a large number of people for a rather chilly night. I appreciate that. I think you should be proud of those things and very impressed with each other that you're willing to take the time to be involved. Because it's really hard. They're really hard decisions. And I really thank all of you for being involved, caring about the district, caring about the community, and being supportive as we look through things through this process. So I believe that is all I have. I'll be happy to answer questions. Joe, you're not going to be mad if I move around? Okay, good, because I'm not good at standing still. Okay, questions. Anything you can ask is open. Yes, sir.
How often is the state looking at funding, changing in their funding structure? Just this year, see that we're going to get $3 million less. We make $3 million in cuts. How often is that decided?
So the question was, how often does the state relook at funding of schools? So typically it's every 2 years, and you can kind of see that. The state had a rule before that if you were funded at a certain level, they would not decrease that level. That would happen over time. It was called the guarantee. They've taken that away. That was a huge factor in all this. Now, I would tell you again, that doesn't fix our underlying issue. Our enrollment has decreased. At some point, that was going to happen. This was really a perfect storm of a lot of things coming together. The state changed the funding model. They didn't fully fund the Fair School Funding Plan. They no longer had the guarantee in place. All these things came together. Inflation, insurance, the county commissioner, all these things come together, and it is the perfect storm for a school district. And I believe if you're attentive to this, we're not unique within Lake County even of school districts that are facing this. There's many. When the state presented at the school board the other day, I believe the number was 46 schools that are in this situation across the state. It's not unique. What I can tell you from watching other school districts, I think the input that we've gotten from staff, community members, that's unique. That's reflective of who is in this community and what we believe in this community. That part's unique. Short answer, every 2 years is the easy answer, but the state, it could be every year or two. The state is doing a lot of investment with charter schools and private schools, which they're pulling money from public schools and diverting money that way. That is part of the whole implication of all of this. But in general, it's every 2 years. Okay? Other questions I can answer? Yes?
If the Fair School Funding Plan was fully funded, would we be in this?
If the Fair School Funding Plan was fully funded, would we be in this situation? Yes, not to this degree. I can't tell you exactly how much, but I go back to, that underlying issue of enrollment. Our funds were going to be reduced at the state level regardless. And you can actually see a trend over time. They have been, based on the number of kids we have. It's just they stripped away the guarantee and they didn't fully fund the Fair School Funding Plan. So all of that together, we would have seen a decrease because of less kids, but because of those other two factors, it's a larger decrease. Yes?
The staff reductions, so I have two questions. The staff reductions, will that impact with the quality of care with the amount of children that will be needing to be placed in classrooms, compensate with the staff reductions? And then also, what areas are you looking at in terms of specific class curriculum? So like, for example, home ec. If there's not enough students signed up for home ec, would you be reducing that teacher and putting them into a different area?
Okay, your first question was about classes and reductions, and would it increase class sizes?
And affecting the quality of
And the quality. No, that's part of the challenge of this is how do we maintain that which we are good at and make the reductions but not create deficits. Like that is the hard, tricky challenge of this. And that goes back to that goal of the value within the district. How do we identify that? It's tricky. It's part of that challenge of looking for reductions that we can make that keeps us where we are academically. And quite honestly, I'll tell you, I want to improve our academics. It's going to be a challenge to do because we've got to make a number of changes. But, I can say, for one, and I know Mr. Nisley and I have talked about this a number of times, is providing more opportunities at the high school. That is an absolute goal I have of how do we get kids out of study hall and give more electives. That's really hard to do in a budget reduction process. Are there ways to do it? Yeah, I think there might be ways to do it, but they're very complex and difficult to do. I'm not answering your question specifically, but what I am saying is, no, I'm not looking, you look across our district and our grade levels, your average classroom is 22 to 27, roughly. I'm not looking at taking our grade levels beyond that. I know that there's not value in doing that. A question that has come up a little bit connected to this, I think, is what about our special ed programs? I'm not looking at making radical changes to special ed programs. I know we need to provide those services, and there's a lot of value of what we do. And I don't want to take away from kids who incredibly need that support and services. So again, it's trying to look at where are there reductions you can make to keep those really quality things. And that is hard. That's where we get to potential reductions that are very challenging, very difficult, and I will say again, nothing that people are going to be excited when I share reductions. They're bad. Like every reduction I'm going to say is going to be bad. Your second question, you have to remind me, I forgot that.
You sort of tied it in with
Good.
the electives, whether.
Oh.
So, for example, when my older sister was in high school, they taught Latin, and there wasn't enough students interested in Latin, so they had to eliminate that from their. So I'm asking if, for example, art and music is going to be affected in the process too. Because I know that's been on everybody's minds, and that art and music, and even PE has been an issue with it.
So I can absolutely tell you this. I am not eliminating art, music, or PE like that. Could there be reductions in it? Yes. I am not eliminating them solely. Okay. Other question, I shouldn't say I'm not eliminating. I'm not recommending for elimination. The board has to vote. I don't want to overstep my bounds, but I would not recommend that. Another thing I know that I've shared very publicly, I believe in preschool. I believe in full day kindergarten. Those are not things I'm going to recommend, eliminating preschool or going back to half day kindergarten. We have to figure out a way to do that. Early education is incredibly important for kids. It sets an incredible path for them. The fact that our school board committed to full day kindergarten, I think, is incredibly important. We have a really good preschool program. I've been involved in preschools for the past 3 years before this, and we have a very good preschool program. I'm not going to propose either of those things either. Yes?
How do Auburn classes and CCP classes affect your work?
How do Auburn and CCP affect our budget? Because the kids are being educated elsewhere, we don't get full funding for kids. So an easy way to say that is the state gives you funds for career tech, for example. But Auburn will get those funds. And because we're educating, there's a formula, and I'm just going to simplify it. Essentially, for a career tech kid, we have them for half the day. Auburn has them for half the day. The funding flows just like that. We don't get the full funding. But in truth, we're not fully educated, like we're not fully doing that. But that was a very generic way of saying it. It's not very precise. Same thing with College Credit Plus. Since the college is providing them that course and that coursework, we're funding that into the college. Does that make sense? Okay. Same thing if we have a kid that's placed outside the district. There could be a student whose needs determine that they need to be placed outside of the district. We're either going to pay for that, or that entity is going to get the funding. Funding follows kids. That's an easy way of saying it. Anything else I can answer? Yes, sir.
You talked about transportation, about going through the state minimum. With what is basically the state minimum, considering that's, say, 7% or 75% of Madison has no sidewalks?
Yeah. So that's one of the, and you know, we have to look at transportation. It has to be something we consider. I'm not saying it's the answer of a reduction, but it's got to be something we consider. State minimum for transportation. Schools are required to transport kids that live over 2 miles from school, but not high school. So if you went to state minimum, it would be only kids who live beyond 2 miles from the school, kindergarten through 8th grade would get transportation, not 9th through 12th. Now, I can tell you, our administrators, going back to that premise, we have to look at everything. We have to examine everything. We have to look for what are the right decisions to make. And transportation, we've talked about that. One of our worries of that is that we don't have sidewalks. Another worry is we have a huge township, largest one in Ohio. And we know we have kids that are spread out throughout the township. So even with that fact, if we reduce to 2 miles, because we've again looked at all these numbers, it only impacts so many students as well. Like there's a lot of kids that live beyond 2 miles. Our board policy actually has transportation set at 2 miles. We currently transport beyond that though, like less than 2 miles. Additionally, something else that I know was brought up in a community meeting, but it is something we are looking into too, is right now we don't do cluster stops. So if you have state minimum also is cluster stops are if you live within a 1/4 mile of a stop, then you could be required to walk to that cluster, to that area. What's that?
They're doing that now.
Only some, not entirely, but we could set that up. That could be an option that you could set that up that it's cluster stops throughout the district.
Now, another part of that is if you don't have to do high school, but you're going to be putting middle schoolers basically now with the high schoolers, does it make a difference not doing a little bit of high schoolers? Because they're already there for the middle schoolers that are going to the same school.
Yeah, what do you mean by middle school with the high school?
I'm talking like the grade level.
Oh, if the building grade levels were changed,
Correct.
is what you're saying.
Yeah, because you're going to be moving.
Okay.
What, they're talking like 7, 8 going up with the high school.
Mhm.
So now you're supposed to transport 7th and 8th graders, but you now have 9th and 12th that could be at the same stop.
Yeah. So the question is, if there was a change in grade levels by building, if that was one of the decisions, and if the high school was now a 7 to 12 building, that's the hypothetical that we're working on. If it was 7 to 12, I think was why would you take 7th and 8th, why would you transport 7th and 8th but not 9th through 12th? It's a fair point, and again, I would tell you that in that world of examining everything, we've examined that too. A large conversation we've had is what will it do to attendance? Because attendance is a huge problem for school districts throughout the entire nation. And that is a concern, is will that impact attendance? And yeah, I think it probably would.
Years ago, when my kids were in school, high school, they stopped transporting high schoolers. And basically, bottom line, we were threatened, if we didn't pass a levy.
Mhm.
They requested blood backfire. The levy went down big time. Did anybody look at how it affected the attendance then versus what would have happened?
So, no, I have not looked at how that affected attendance then. That's a really good point. Andrea, will you make a note of that? Attendance when transportation was ended at the high school. Was that the year that, I've heard this before, so I'm just asking, was that the year that it was changed, like during the year?
I believe so.
Okay, because that's the way I heard it too. Yeah, we can look and see what the attendance was from when they had transportation and when they didn't have transportation. Yeah, that's a good point. It's, anyone that, and I know I have a couple of staff who work at North who do the transportation after school and make sure kids are getting on cars and stuff, but anyone that is familiar at North, we have a lot of people that drop off and pick up their kids. That has been a shift over the years where kids don't ride buses like they used to. We looked at this just the other day. I told you we have 2,900 kids. We have roughly, Shannon, I'm going to ask you to help remind me. I believe it was 1,500 that were routed. 1,800 routed. 1,800 of the 2,500 are routed for buses. That means they've said, we're going to ride a bus. 1,800 of the 2,500, but of that 1,800, only 80% actually ride the bus. So it's just an interesting, again, going back to, you asked me, did I look at that attendance then? No, I think it's a great idea. I'm trying to also say, we've looked at that too, of how many kids say they're going to ride the bus versus how many kids ride the bus, to look at what's the implication if we do something to transportation. Yeah. Yeah, so you know that. Well, why am I telling you? Yes.
So I have a quick question.
Yeah.
What would it take to have a bus tax for those 800 kids that are riding with their parents that could be riding a bus? That we can charge those parents to drop them off up here so we can save some money on transportation costs? Probably have to be done at the state, right?
Yeah, I don't think we legally could do that. I like the idea. So the idea was the families who could ride a bus, but they're transporting their kids on their own, could we put a tax of sorts on them for doing that? And I would say that it would be conflicting because we can't, it's an interesting idea, but we can't charge in any way for transportation, so I don't think we could penalize for not transporting. I think our attorney would not like that if I asked her.
Have a bus. I mean, that'd be done at the state level.
Yeah, it would have,
A bus available for you.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Well, and that is, and having worked in other districts, it's not unique to Madison that families take their kids to school. That is a national phenomenon. Like, that has dramatically increased. I know at South it's the same thing. At the middle school I see it's the same thing. At the high school, standing outside, it's the same thing. It's just different than it used to be. It's just interesting.
In some cases, it's nothing more than the fact that the kids aren't actually at their own houses. They're at
Sure.
grandparents or another relative.
Yeah.
They're being sat there.
Yeah, it could be that they're at a different house. I know when my kids were young, my kids never actually were enrolled in the district they went to, so of course we had to transport them. But I know it's a safety thing as well. Like, you, as a parent, you feel more comfortable dropping them off, watching them walk in, and watching them walk out. I think that has been part of it too. But I agree. Other things I can answer.
Well, just a statement as far as safety. If actual parents or people that are driving on the road actually paid attention to the laws, these kids wouldn't be in danger. As a bus driver, daily, I have somebody run my red lights.
Yeah, and I will tell you that is one of the grants we applied. I'm sorry, the point was about transportation and people not being so safe on the roads. It's one of the grants we applied for, was to get the cameras so we could identify and report those too. Because I know from talking to transportation that's a concern. Did you have a question? Yes.
Has it been looked at absorbing some of the ESC contracts directly rather than paying the contracted price?
Yes, that's absolutely something to consider. So the question was, we have a lot of ESC contracts, and I don't want to just pick on them, and contracts in general. We curriculum support, special ed, nursing, behavior support. There's a lot of different areas that we partner with ESC for contracts. And then we have a number of other contracts. Yes, I will tell you that we absolutely, and I would tell you that that will be one of my recommendations, is somehow impacting contracts. I've told you, and I fully believe this, the team working on it believes it, our strength in our district is our people. I fully believe that one of the recommendations will be to pull back contracts, but that means we're pulling back work. And that means we're going to have to pick that up internally, which means somehow we have to figure out how to do that too, and it can't be add people. Like that I will also tell you, there is no adding people. We will have to bring back work, and it'll have to be picked up internally by the staff we already have. But yes, that absolutely will be, because it ties back to that premise of our people are really valuable. Our people really matter. I want us to identify as many opportunities to reduce, not just by doing it with staff. Because the state would tell you, you have to cut $3 billion, 80% of your budget is your staff, you need to find the money in staffing. I know for this district, having worked with the board, listening to people, going to our buildings and seeing it, that's not the answer for us. So part of it, yes, I think the contracts, it has to be part of it. It's just not going to be easy though. We don't have curriculum people in that way, so picking that work and bringing it back into the district saves money, but now we have to have people who can do the work internally. But yes.
Circling back to CCP, I know we have the option for several kids to go to several different colleges throughout the local area. Is there differences in the amount that each college bills Madison? And is that price transparent to parents and kids that are looking at it? So that we can be mindful of being as a district.
It's a really good question. So the question was the CCP cost, and is it transparent to kids and families so when they're picking it? State law is the district is required to do it, and we can't force you. So you're able to make the decision. I will tell you in Lake County from looking at it, because the colleges send us like the agreement of what it's going to be, they're all in line. There's not some extreme. I worked in the Summit County for a time. I can tell you that those universities were dramatically different. So the district did try to get kids, they incentivize kids going to particular ones. We don't really have that problem here, but that was a really good question. I appreciate you thinking through how could that impact the district too. Other questions I can answer? Yes.
So I pulled up the district profile reports from the state.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's correct or not.
Okay.
It's from last year. It's just some numbers. So it says that our total revenue per pupil last year was $12,800 per pupil. That's all income from all state.
Mm-hmm.
Local. The average for similar districts, and I don't know what the definition of similar districts, but I assume it's our size, was $15,500.
Mm-hmm.
It's the difference is $2,713 per kid.
Correct.
If you multiply that by the kids, it's $6.7 million.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about $3 million.
Yes.
So, my question, it's clear that we're underfunded
Yes.
by a lot relative to similar schools. Actually, it says the statewide average, not just similar schools, it's $18,000, which comes out to $14 million underfunded relative to the state. So, why is that? In your opinion, is it that state funding thing that you're talking about? Also, some other stats here, just to go along with it. Our revenue, as of last year, 52% of it came from the state versus 42% for schools like ours. So the state is more.
You have to pause for a minute because you've got a lot of stuff right there. So the first point you were pointing out is the average pupil funding, us compared to similar districts, which does look at enrollment size, but then also the state actually does a really good job with data, and they also look at districts that have a similar population of students. So it's looking at are you rural district or are you more urban? Your percentage of students with disabilities, there's a lot of different categories, so then they put you in similar groups. I believe you were saying 12,015 or 12, yeah, which similar was 15, and then statewide was 18. Why is it so different? And I'm going to tie in your second point, which was looking at our funding. From the state, we get 52%. Yes, and then, but like the district average for across the state, did you say 42? So I'm going to tie all that together, I think. So our state contribution we get from the state is 52% of our revenue. All other districts, it's 42%. Why is that so? So I'm going to explain why this is so, but I'm going to explain this, but I have to say this first. I am not suggesting, recommending, or proposing that we have a levy, okay? I do not believe that is the answer. I believe that we need to make reductions. We have to right size. I believe that is the truth. But I will tell you from examining this question a lot, because that's the same information that I looked at too, we depend on the state at a much higher rate than other districts throughout the state, and significantly more than other districts in the county other than Perry. And we just don't have the same levies that other districts do. But I also would tell you, I don't believe it's the right answer either. Like, I know that our community can't afford more and more levies. I think that's part of that unique challenge. I think long-term, that's going to have to be something for the district to look at. I don't think that's a right now answer, because right now we've had a decrease in enrollment, which is directly connected to that funding issue. You're looking at a more macro point, which is a larger point, but something we're going to have to examine with the board of, is there a way to look at funding differently, is what I would tell you. Because the more reliant you are on the state, when they make changes, the more it hurts. And that's part of our issue. Yes.
One follow-up to that.
Yes.
Just an interesting tidbit I saw on this. So you mentioned 5% of our funding comes from the federal.
Roughly.
The average for the state and for people that are, districts like us is 10.
Yeah.
So I wonder what the difference there is, why I'm not seeing that 5%.
And some of that, there's a few categories with why is our federal funding less than similar districts or in general. Having worked in other districts, yes, I was used to a much larger federal amount of money. That's identified with again, it ties into a lot of the unique populations within your district. That is a big factor of that. So poverty, race, disability, English language learners, a lot of those categories impact that. We've got to get really good at ensuring that we're reporting information really well. There's a thing called EMIS in the state of Ohio, and that's how you exchange data with the state. And that's an area that we've been trying to impact this year too, to make sure we properly inform the state of who our students are in those special categories to make sure we're getting full funding.
I can see there's a big difference between our district.
Yes. Now, I would also tell you, just tied into that, the federal government is starting to reduce the federal contributions to districts. Like, they're not going to fund English language learners next year, which is just a philosophical belief at the federal level. Like, they're not going to fund that anymore. And I think they're going to decrease, like Title I is a large one, which is for kids that have special needs, essentially. They're going to reduce those fundings too, which, again, that's tied to a philosophical, political belief beyond anyone's control.
Do you know if they're going to reallocate those funds elsewhere, or are they just eliminating the fund?
Oh, I think they're going to reallocate them. They're not going to reallocate them to schools now, is my belief. But I don't want to get into that conversation. Yes?
Rural schools and urban schools,
Mm-hmm.
are they funded the same, like the same schedule? Or do rural schools get funded one way, like on a chart? Like there's, I'm trying to think of the right word, their formulas.
Mm-hmm.
Like, are we funded because we're rural one way and urban funded a different way because they're urban?
Yeah. We pull up Akron on your, are you looking at it right now? Pull up Akron real quick because I'm going to show you an example. So is it different? Yes. It's different because, one, urban districts often don't have the same amount of levies because they have larger population. You know, if you have 1,000 people that you're getting $200 from for your levy, that is a number. But if you only have 100 people and you're getting $200, that's a different number. So urban districts, they end up getting a lot more money, but they also tend to have kids that have different challenges, which then they get more money from the federal government for that too. I worked at Akron, and I can tell you that their base rate for kids, he's going to identify as different than what he just identified because, yes, there was a huge amount. But that's part of, you know, I think every district is unique, and you have your unique needs that you have and the different types of kids you have. What, did you find it? 20% is what? Is federal from Akron, which is aligned to the uniquenesses of kids they have compared to our 5%-ish. They get a lot more federal money. Does that make sense? They're differently funded. One, based on the levies that they have locally, but an urban district is going to get more money from the state and the federal government, which is tied to the kids that they have. It does. Yes?
It seems to me that back when I was on the school board, trying to pass a levy, there was a district in Columbus that was trying to raise the same amount of money as we did. They had to put 1 mill on there.
Mm-hmm.
We had to put 7 mills on it.
Yeah.
Is that still kind of a,
Yeah, that is absolutely the issue.
for us to raise the same amount of money in our poor community here, we have to, the state doesn't take that into account anywhere?
No. And it's the same part of where the state, it's why school districts are required to have inside millage. We're required to, because that offsets what the state is going to fund a school district. Your point is the same point I would make. To make up this $3 million budget deficit, we would have to pass over 10 mil levy to make up for that. I would suggest that won't happen. There is no way that the community would support that. I'm again saying what I said earlier. I would no way recommend that because I feel like that is not responsible to our community. I believe we have to make reductions, and we have to be responsible as a district and as a community for that. But we have to keep looking at our funding situation too. But part of it is also how do we right size the district? Because again, we've had a decrease in enrollment for over 20 years. And that's just part of it. But no, the state does not. And, it's part of where, there's a really interesting thing about when property taxes started, and there was a significant impact to businesses. Businesses paid a large portion of the property tax, which would go not just to schools, but fire, police, libraries, Adams Board, all these different groups get part of your taxes through your levies. Businesses paid a large portion. That has decreased dramatically. There was a point where they were paying 70% of the total property tax bill. Now that has crept into the 20 and 30% range, and that is a position Ohio has taken, is they believe that if you emphasize business, it drives business and it drives family and wealth and all that for a district or a community, which I'm not saying is wrong. It's just they've taken the property tax where it was and they have now shifted it to it's overly reliant on homeowners, and it's no longer equivalent to homeowners and businesses. But that was a deliberate move based on a belief of supporting businesses and getting businesses to come to communities, which I'm not saying is wrong. It just hurts homeowners. And I don't know a single homeowner that's like, hey, yeah, raise my taxes more. I'm totally good with that. I don't think anybody thinks that. You're paying a lot in taxes. So that's part of where I go back to, we need to look as a district of how do we reduce that money. It's 10%. It's going to hurt. It's going to be hard. Anything else I can answer? Okay, apparently basketball practice is ending. Yes, I'm sorry, one last.
I know Chardon went through this a while back, and they eliminated schools. Two schools. I have grandchildren, I go there, this is why I know this. And all of a sudden, their enrollment started going up rapidly. They no longer have space for all their students. They have some classes that don't even have classrooms. Is that a perceived possibility happening to us?
So the question was, Chardon went through this, but then they got more kids and then they didn't have space, a lot more kids and they didn't have space. Is that something that could happen to us? Yeah, I think if we look at anything with buildings, we have to also look at if it went the other direction, how would we do that? Something else I would tell you, regardless of buildings, at some point we're going to have to do something about the high school because it is an older building. It's got issues. I don't think anyone doesn't know that. So at some point, we're going to have to make a capital plan to impact that. That is not today, but it's got to come at some point because we know that. If North is a building, we absolutely have to do something at North. That would have to be as well, because both of those buildings have significant facility needs. To replace the roof at North, it's $900,000. We don't have that ability to do that. I'll tell you, every time it rains, it gives me anxiety that it's going to leak because we've had that issue at North. So we have to consider that in our long-term plan too and account for it when we look at our budget year over year. Okay? Anything else I can answer? Okay. Thank you all very much for coming out.